And there we are live on YouTube. So we got Bruce and Lynn. And Bruce, you want to introduce our book?
Sure. I've just got to bring it up here. I've got a whole bunch of things, tabs, windows in the same app. So, um, uh, let's see. We are reading from the wrong thing up here. Let's see. Where is it? Okay. Um, it is A Symphony of Love autobiography from Ken Wapnick. The correct title is Symphony of Love Selections of Dr. Wapnick's writings, autobiographies, poetry, short stories, and articles edited by Gloria Wapnick and from the Foundation for A Course in Miracles. And let's see, I had a whole bunch of windows up there for different projects I was working on. So pardon the slight chaos here. Let's get the place where we left off at up. And that is, let's see, I had it on let's see, about him
You're
being baptized in
baptized, yeah.
the first part of the trip is the Gethsemane pilgrimage. Is that what you have? Something like that?
I was baptized.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
All
yep,
right. Okay.
yeah. So I guess Gary's in California. He's going to be seeing Robert and his wife today, or
Oh,
they're seeing him.
yeah.
So
And also Dennis, who attends a number of the online course groups from San Diego, will also be going to Gary's workshop in Temecula. And interestingly enough, the workshop will be at a indigenous reservation that Lori, who also from Rocky Mountains Miracle Center, uh, basically played a song that was recorded there, and that's when Dennis chimed in and said, "Oh, I'm going there to hear Gary's workshop this Saturday." So they'll be,
that is something else. That's
yeah,
very funny.
yeah, all the synchronicities.
It is. It's so strange. It's like I was when I went to uh, uh, where was it? San Francisco, to the Attitudinal Healing conference several years ago. It was Jerry Jampolsky's birthday, and they did a training. We did a training for doing the attitudinal healing work. I went through the program there and got qualified, certified, whatever. But there was a guy there that was in my Course in Miracles group in Pueblo. And he and some of his other friends had gone out to San Francisco for this very training. Neither one of us knew the other was going. It was like, what? And then we said, oh, we'll get back together when we get to Pueblo and start doing these circles. We never did. But it was great. It was very funny and coincidental. Like, oh man, strange to find a familiar face here. And
Well, we all are on a convergence course to the oneness we never left, right?
exactly, exactly. And and then that's where I met the people that I went to the Oneness Blessing training with too. They were at that same thing. It was crazy.
Mhm.
So not only we're doing attitudinal healing, we're doing oneness. All right. Um, all right. So do you want me to read?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So we're reading about Ken. Ken has been hanging out with the monks. He was wanting to join the monastery. He's been a Jewish boy his whole life, but he decided to go and become baptized as a Catholic. So he says, I was baptized on September 12th, 22nd, 1972. And as I did not expect the heavens to open up, I was not disappointed when they did not do so. Nonetheless, I felt pleased, for I knew I had done what he wished. Um, Jesus. My most distinctive memory of that Friday evening, but that there was a full moon. Ooh, we're getting a full moon too now. By now, some ideas were forming as to the post-Thanksgiving plans, and they began to focus on the southwestern part of the United States. I did not like the idea of living alone and braving a winter of snow and ice in the northern mountains. My life might have been changing, but I was still a city boy in many ways. But New Mexico or Arizona appealed to me as they were both beautiful and sparsely populated. and I felt I could survive by myself. Close friends whom I have not seen in some time lived in Santa Fe, and so I decided to combine a visit with a scouting expedition. 1 week after my baptism, I set out by train. Oh my goodness, he took the train out to Santa Fe from New York. It's crazy. Uh, the first part of the trip was identical to my Gethsemane pilgrimage, and the idea, already in the back of my mind, grew stronger that on my way back, I should stop off at my new home and have my true baptismal mass. The idea persisted, and so I cut short my stay after first ascertaining the relative ease of finding a cabin and hastened back to Kentucky. I could not wait to return and was warmly greeted by my new friends when I arrived. On Saturday, I was asked by my Jungian friend, who was also the cantor, if I would like to attend Mass the next day with the community and I could stay by him. I was speechless, but managed to stammer out an of course. I could not eat for the rest of the day or following morning and could not stay still. I could not conceive of myself standing in that sanctuary with all the monks, a part of that holy and sacred mystery that occurred at the altar, but I could never have anticipated the experience it would be. Ooh, this is exciting. Until then, I had had what I consider to be important and powerful spiritual experiences, mostly all of which involved Beethoven's music, but none of those could compare with what occurred at this Mass. I felt as if I were in the very presence of God, in the center of his kingdom. It was his world I felt in me and his spirit, which rushed through me. Everything vanished but him, and I knew I was where he wanted me. I was home with him, and he with me, and there was nothing else. I stumbled out at the conclusion with my friend, barely able to thank him. And before I left that afternoon, two more lovely things occurred. My friend had also arranged that I meet with the abbot, and so for 30 minutes I was able once more to speak of my current life and possible vocation as a monk. I liked him very much and thought how nice it would be to be a monk in his monastery. And finally, the guest master invited me to stand next to him at None, the 215 office. And so I was able to sing the Psalms right along with the monks I now felt were my brothers. I left for New York praying that God would eventually lead me back to Gethsemane. It was such a lovely, comforting feeling to know that I had a home and a family, but somewhere inside, I think I knew my journeys were far from over. So he is having a very intense spiritual experience having to do with having his baptism and becoming a Catholic and celebrating the Mass and taking communion and all that business, which I can understand that. There is a very, it is a very mystical kind of feeling
Hmm.
uh, when you're involved in that. I don't know.
Okay. I'll take
So
your word for it.
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's hard to, if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to imagine it. But these places are made to put you in that kind of space. The
Mhm.
sound and the music and the whole attitude of everything. It's really made to put you in a place where you feel very connected and it's a very deep mystical kind of experience. Probably like being in the pyramids or being
Hmm.
being any place that is has a history of divinity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you're saying that, I was thinking we're all entranced by the world. So why would one particular set of experiences and paths and practices and whatnot be any less um, entrancing than any other, right? I,
Yeah, yeah.
I also have. I'm glad you pronounced known. Is that how it's pronounced? Because I would have read it none.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had to look in the footnotes. It says that editors note the divine office, presumably that's Catholic term, includes matins, lauds, prime, terci, sext, none, vespers, and compliant, all of which are said chanted daily at certain times of the day, the canonical hours. And it reminds me of when we were in Egypt, we heard the muezzins, I think that's how it's pronounced, chanting through rather distorted loudspeakers at the top of
Mhm.
these minarets in the cities that we were in Egypt, that with the call to prayer, and it was something we weren't expecting. I mean, I remember as a kid hearing just very briefly things about that, but that was kind of before the amplified era, and I just figured I might hear kind of softly in the distance, something like that. But then the first exposure to that was hearing it blaring over loudspeakers, 100 feet in the air at the top of these minarets, and uh, wasn't quite the mystical experience that I sort of was thinking about. I do have a very short um, monastery joke
Oh,
since
sure.
we're on that. And so there's a guy who decides that his life isn't working, and he said, "Okay, I need to turn my life over to a higher power." And so he goes to live in a monastery, and so he talks to the head abbot there, um, and the abbot says in hushed tones in the private office, he says, "Well, we're very strict here. Um, you're only allowed to say 2 words every 10 years." And he kind of gulped and said, "Okay." Well, he knew it was going to be pretty austere, um, but and he nodded in assent. And 10 years goes by, and he goes before the abbot again and said, "Okay, in hushed tones, what are your 2 words?" And the guy says, after a decade there, says, "Bed hard." And then the abbot says, "Yes, I know. This is an austere uh, uh, situation, and but that's part of our spiritual practice, something like that." And another 10 years goes by, and he goes again before the abbot, and he says, "Well, it's been 20 years. What do you have to say? What have you learned?" And he says, "Food cold." And says, "Yep, that's part of that austerity." So finally another 10 years goes by, and after 30 years, he has his third audience with the abbot, and Hushtones the abbot says, "Okay, how about now? What can you share after 30 years here?" He says, "I quit." And the abbot says, "Well, I understand. All you've done since you've been here is bitch, bitch, bitch." So anyway, I was like that joke.
That's a bad joke. That's pretty funny though.
Anyway, so got that out of my system. Now we can go on.
All right. All right. So, uh, continuing with Ken, who was probably staying in a place with cold food and hard bed, said, sometime soon after my unofficial baptism, I had a sudden and unexpected change of mind and felt that before going out west, I should first go to Israel. I did not know where this idea came from, although it soon became clear to me that indeed that was where I was to go. Ever since I had written Moses, I had entertained the thought of one day going to Sinai and climbing the mountain. And now it suddenly appeared that this was the time.
Can I have a pause again?
Sure.
For the context, for people who are just tuning in, um, uh, he wrote a story about Moses. He didn't like get out a pen and paper and an envelope and a stamp and
Write a letter to Moses.
write a letter to Moses. Yeah. So if somebody's just joining us, I say, wait a minute, he's not going to get that letter. He's been gone a while.
Well, I mean, it goes to the right address, maybe, but
Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. How do we know, right?
all right.
I guess I'm in a silly mood today, so
I guess that's
you'll have to
it's
forgive
fun.
me. You'll have to forgive me.
Yeah, it's funny because I once wrote a story where Moses was actually a primary character Um, but I won't go into that. It's just a kind of science fiction-y kind of story. Anyway, strangely enough, considering the most recent events, I felt little desire to visit Jerusalem or any of the holy places. It was the desert, and of course, the recent events were, I think, there was a war that had been going on um, in Israel, so they probably didn't want to go to places where there was going to be war or bloodshed or anything. Uh, anyway, um, and so it was the desert and mountain I wished to experience and nothing more. I did think I might stay for a while at Santa Catarina, the Greek Orthodox monastery at the base of the mountain, travel through the desert and then see what would happen next. I thought perhaps too I might then go to Jerusalem for a short while, visit the Trappist monastery of Latrun nearby, and then return via Europe to the United States and my New Mexico retreat. Or so I thought.
Can I have you pause one more time?
Yeah, yes.
I actually, my wife Nancy and I did actually go to St. Catherine's Monastery at the base of Mount Sinai, and we did climb up Mount Sinai um, on a trip with Greg Braden in the fall of '92, and that was an interesting experience. That's where we took a little peek in the the church there. This is I'm trying to think of the name of uh, the sect. Oh, I'm doing a brain fade. Anyway, it's a very old Christian sect, and you'd think it'd be something you wouldn't think it'd be a Christian monastery in in Egypt, but it is actually, and yeah, Greek Orthodox. But there's another name for it too. Anyway, I'll think of it. Maybe someone listening might know what it is. But it's interesting architecture at the monastery because it's basically been built over many years, many centuries, and uh, there's several different styles. There's domes, and then there's things that look like the Belvedere Tower of M.C. Escher art fame, and all kinds of different things. It's just sort of an interesting conglomeration of architectural styles. And at the back of the monastery, there's this looks like a large shrub or a small tree, and they claim that that's the burning bush.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I remember when we peeked in the temple, the church, what do they call it? There was people waving the censers, which they had the incense in these metal things that were swinging back and forth, and there was it didn't seem appropriate for us to go into it at that time. And we didn't really feel drawn to do that. But I don't think we're actually permitted. But they just let you kind of peek in there, I guess. But it was an interesting place. And then they just not far from there was the place where they had lodging for all the tourists, and even those were also kind of austere, but simple, but adequate. And then we hiked up the mountain. I remember several people, they had horses or donkeys for, I think it was a donkey that they had for one lady in our group who her mobility wasn't that great. And but we all went up to the top of Mount Sinai. I remember taking a couple of things stuck in my mind, taking photos from the area, and there was one rock, a large, like 2 or 3 story rock that we could see in the intermediate distance that looked like the profile of Beethoven. I still, still,
Whoa.
I still have a photo of that somewhere around. And then the other thing that we were kind of amazed at is we got there in kind of late afternoon, early evening, and it was just kind of twilight, and walked back down mostly in dim moonlight, as I recall. But the at the top, just before the top of Mount Sinai, um, like a couple hundred yards before the official peak, there was like a vending stand, with tea and snacks and things like that. And, but we weren't kind of expecting a commercial operation at the top of Mount Sinai. It wasn't like horrible or anything, but it was just kind of like unexpected. It was just kind of funny. But
That is kind of funny.
yep,
So
yep, yep.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like kind of the donut shop on the top of Pikes Peak.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Although I don't think Pikes Peak is usually considered a religious pilgrimage. Although the two times I was up there, the second time was when we took the Cog Railway up to the top, which was pretty fun. And the first time by car, but the second time there were people that were bicycling all the way up and then about to head back down. And boy, they obviously were pretty avid and in shape bike riders. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, that's the thing. Go up there and eat donuts and then ride your bicycle back down, I guess. I don't know. There's people that there's a race, that, of course, every year there's a race up that mountain, the Pikes
Okay.
Hill
I,
Climb.
I think I have heard of that. I haven't seen it, but I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's pretty dang dangerous. I
I
mean,
would think so. Yeah.
crazy, but I know people that do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, gotta be nuts. All right. All right. So, continuing on, my final weeks at the hospital passed quickly. And on November 22nd, I rather sorrowfully made my last goodbyes. My final ties had fallen, and nothing external any longer stood between me and God. And this thought did create some discomfort. I spent a few internally hectic days living by myself in a Manhattan Catholic hotel, taking care of whatever thing had to be done. And on December 1st, 1972, I took off to Israel, taking with me only my Bible, St. John of the Cross, my new teacher, I thought, my unfinished writings, and some clothes. I knew I was not exactly in the best of shape, but I felt that once I got to the desert, things would be different. Boy, I'm sure they were. I did not quite know how bad off I was and the toll the past year had taken on me. Fortunately, the doctor was keeping an eye on me, and his remedy, and this is a capital D doctor, was keeping an eye on me, and his remedy, quite different from mine, was in the process of being administered. When I arrived in Israel, I headed for the Sinai as quickly and directly as I could, going to Eilat, which bordered on the desert. It was only then that reality began to dawn on me. One didn't just go into the Sinai. This was not the Mojave or painted desert. As all the practical difficulties confronted me, I began to see that it was in fact more than those, but an inner lack of readiness that was preventing me, and it was silly to pretend otherwise. Perhaps another time, but this was clearly not the time to be making like Moses. I decided to return north and go to Jerusalem. I did first take a quick half-day plane tour, which landed in the desert and included a 30-minute bus ride to the base of the mountain and a tour of the monastery. It did at least, quote, break the ice and give me a feeling of what it was I was not yet ready for. For indeed, it was an awesome and majestic desert, and I felt inwardly relieved that I did not yet have to experience it. So this is interesting, and it makes me think of course, you've lived in the desert, and I pretty much live in the desert. And remember, uh, in the course it says, what do you do when you go to the desert? You leave. You
And
don't.
I think that's Ken's commentary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually in the course.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to look it up again. Maybe yeah, let me look.
yeah. Just I'll look it up because yeah, I found that quite surprising. Because yes, of course, I live in the desert. And I wouldn't think about leaving it, but I've got all the amenities of life here too. So It's not like I'm out there living under the stars, but
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, we synchronistically we just signed online digitally the escrow papers to sell our Arizona house in the desert yesterday.
oh, good.
After figuring out how to make the tech work, which is a little tricky, but anyway, but so yep, we'll be down to one house on middle of next week.
Oh, well, that'll be I'm sure, financial relief anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Nothing else,
yeah.
but still, I don't know. All right. Would you like to read for a while?
Sure, sure. So let me get to that. And so I would go to Jerusalem, though not really sure why. That night I had a dream which would have certainly told me if I'd paid any real attention. I was sleeping in a room with two others in a private home. I was lying in a bed, almost asleep. The two came in and got into bed. It was dark and I began to drift off. I was still lying on my back when the image began, sort of a waking dream. And here's his account of the dream. I was laying in bed next to a friend, also on his back. I later associated him with the young Thomas Merton. We were talking of Christ and something about how he suffered. He, presumably Christ. And this is probably, before the course, obviously, so we know that that's a misconception. Yeah. I suddenly left the conversation, turned back, and began to really feel how he lived and felt. The feeling grew stronger and more intense, more and more. I felt his presence in me growing. I began to breathe more heavily, becoming more exalted, and began to say, "My God," or "Oh God," over and over again. I felt totally alone and yet knew my friend was next to me, so part of me was holding back. Then I heard the two people actually in the room with me whispering, and I realized that they were responding to me. The experience continued a bit longer, but I contained my murmurings and speech. Then I lay still with my eyes closed, and a shining light, an illumination began. It grew and grew and persisted. I made sure my eyes were closed, and it continued. I knew it was a continuation of the dream, that it was Jesus coming to me. It gradually faded and left. As soon as it was over, I knew it was a sign from God, and though I did not write it down then, I remembered it with no difficulty when I woke. But still, I felt no different. I felt no peace, no quiet, and the effect of the dream was purely intellectual. I was looking forward to going to Jerusalem because at least it was a destination, but I did not feel the least bit spiritual. The bus ride was long and tiring, and I seriously considered that perhaps all of this had been a big mistake and that I should just return to the United States and go to New Mexico as I had originally planned. But the dream could not be ignored, nor its meaning denied. And though I don't believe I associated it at the time with Jerusalem, I am sure it strongly influenced my continuing on and staying there. I no longer felt able to make any kind of decision regarding this, as I was both physically and emotionally exhausted, not to mention disappointed over how things were going. I wanted to stay in a Catholic hospice and had a list of places in both the old and new cities, but I wanted no part of old Jerusalem, not yet, not while I was in the condition I was in. I arrived in Jerusalem after dark with a number of places in mind, but could not find them. Finally, totally exhausted and my arms breaking from my suitcase, I checked into a hotel in the center of the busiest section of the city. But it certainly did not matter at that point. I slept reasonably well, things considered, and the next morning again tried to locate the hospices. But although I was now able to find them, they did not have accommodations. I was really confused, for I could not understand why I was having all this trouble. I rethought the issue of the old city, but it still felt right to stay outside and perhaps go in for a while at a time. I truly felt it to be a holy place, and I think I was afraid, and so wanted to approach it gradually. But I needed more time to think and relax, and so I decided to remain one more night in the hotel. I rested, walked around a bit, and finally submitted to what appeared to be obvious. Clearly, he wanted me in the old city, and so I agreed. First thing in the morning, I would go. And I did, and of course, there was no difficulty whatsoever. I walked into the Casanova, not Casanova, a rather large Franciscan hospice not far from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which contained within it both Calvary and the tomb in which Jesus was laid, and they had a room. Immediately, I felt different. I knew that I was on his itinerary at last. And from that uh, moment on, things began to flow naturally and easily into each other. I was in his city, in his hands, and as I grew more accepting of that wonderful situation, I increasingly felt quieter. After a couple of days, I was in no rush to leave Jerusalem, indeed, no rush to do anything. What was there to do? All I had to do was be, and he would take care of the rest. I wrote to the Trappists at Latrun and arranged to spend a week with them, which included Christmas. This would not only remove me from the tumult that would surround Jerusalem and Bethlehem that time of year, but would also enable me to spend my first Christmas quietly alone with the Trappists. Do you want to pick up from there?
Sure. All right. So once I was in the old city, I felt much different about the holy sites. I was never much of a tourist, but I now wanted very much to visit some of the Christian places, though I felt little interest in these sites associated with Judaism, such as the Wailing Wall or the Tomb of David, most of all the Garden of Gethsemane in the Mount of Olives, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stood out like shining beacons calling to me. But I drew near to them slowly. I was in no hurry and waited until I felt ready, until I could feel it was clearly the time. Each day I would take another section of the city and wander around. Slowly I was being filled with the holiness which I could feel all around me. Once able to move beyond the atmosphere of tourism and commercialism, the spiritual presence in every stone became unmistakable. The kingdom of heaven is within, and the holy city is where everyone is. But there seems to be something very special about Israel, and above all, its capital city. And that just all reminds me of Jesus in, of course, I know this from Jesus Christ Superstar, that the rocks and stones would rise up and worship, that everything was holy. Um, so and Jesus could experience that. So uh,
What?
in time, I arrived at the garden, the site of that event that had always meant so much to me. I was not disappointed. I could feel God's presence and used to return there almost daily, deriving great comfort, excuse me, kneeling by the rock, feeling quietly at peace. One time while kneeling, I looked up, my eyes still closed, and the white light of the Jesus stream suddenly appeared. It shone with that radiance whose source is unmistakable, and I was filled with a deep peace. But I guess the greatest consolation to me came a few days after I had arrived and had begun to settle in, for I found myself able to write once more. It began slowly, like water trickling through pipes after many months of disuse. But very quickly the writing began to flow, and my joy and gratitude knew no bounds. After almost a year of inner wandering, my sojourn in the desert was ending, and what beautiful places I was coming to. And I knew it was no mere oasis, but indeed the end of the desert.
Can we pause again?
Sure, yes.
I was thinking about a couple of paragraphs back, the end of that paragraph where Ken says, "The kingdom of heaven is within, and the holy city is wherever one is." And then he has but there seems something very special in caps about Israel and above all its capital city. I was thinking about something that I remember going inside the Great Pyramid up to what they call the King's Chamber and going up Mount Sinai and then going through the stones at Stonehenge and different places like that that are supposed to be really special. And I remember giving some talks on sacred geometry a couple of decades ago in in Sedona, Arizona, and on a sacred geometry conference, and I was one of the speakers there. And there was one of my colleagues was giving some talks on sacred sites around the world, and I was coming to the realization, because this was about the time that I was I still hadn't been introduced to Gary's Renard's work, but I was still a course student, even though it was sort of back burner at the time. But there was this kind of haunting feeling like, well, any place is special if you bring the right mindset to it. And 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 then once I got into uh, Ken's work, and obviously this is something what we've been reading is still early in Ken's experience, where he just touches on that, and then talks about how he was still making in his mind Jerusalem is very special. But I was thinking about how once we realize that we bring whatever thought system we have to the places that seem to be external, but it's really in our mind, um, then what makes something sacred is not any coordinates in space or time or geography. It's really our choice for the correction that we call Holy Spirit or Jesus, and in A Course in Miracles, and denying the misinterpretations of the ego's thought system. So that's what makes either everything sacred or everything profane, right? So anyway,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
and
happen
it's
to be,
all it.
oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I'm just glancing at the participants in our Zoom call, and I see Steve Melrose has his hand up. So
Well, yeah, please go ahead, Steve.
Because I am a human being with tribal, uh, innate desire to belong, I still am affected by permission in sacred places or face to face meetings to say to myself, this is sacred because everybody around me agrees. Yet, do I really need the permission of the tribe to declare this time and this place
mhm.
as as sacred as it gets? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, yeah, because I mean, it's really our inner permission that we grant ourselves, isn't it? Yeah, and that's our choice, or what Ken would call a decision maker years later. That is, I get to choose whether I want to see everyone and everything as sacred in any moment or profane by buying into ego's propaganda, which says we're all separate and different, and that's irreconcilable, including our separation from our source. But the Holy Spirit's, as using the course's term, correction would be, well, everyone is eternally innocent, guiltless, and sacred, because nothing happened to divide that, except in a massive hallucinatory dream that we call space-time, the material universe, and all of that is just a forgivable misperception. It's not wrong. It's just incomplete, and outrageously incomplete, even on the level of form, let alone the fact that what our real identity is outside of space and time. And we've put ourselves in a mental state that, for the most part, denies the vast majority of that interconnectedness, sameness, and ultimately oneness, right? Yeah, the real sacredness, right? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, every place you are is where God is,
Yeah.
as we know. So there is no place where God is not, and that includes me. That includes everything. So if we're not experiencing this world as a sacred place, then what are we experiencing? We're experiencing it as an affront or an attack. Because what's not sacred, if where God is, has to be a denial of God being there. So So yeah, it doesn't matter where you are.
And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I was just to
So
say,
I
oh,
can just edit the statement when one or more is here, I dwell among me. Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because well, the idea of two, um, you could think, it's me and the Holy Spirit,
right.
which is really not two, but because there is no
Exactly.
such thing
Yeah, yeah,
as
uh,
two, it's always one.
exactly. I was humorously, I was thinking that when you mentioned the word affront, I was thinking, well, you can only experience an affront when you're thinking in duality, and then you're taken aback by the affront, right?
Oh gosh,
I got to
yeah.
get one bad pun in every
One bad pun day.
session.
Okay, that's okay. So all right, I'll continue reading. The first fruits belonged to Abraham, whose story now, after more than 2 years, resumed its unfolding, almost as if it had never stopped. This is him writing. He's writing now about Abraham.
Mhm.
It received added inspiration as I spent a most deeply felt morning on Mount Moriah, not Carrie, contained within the Muslim shrine of the Dome of the Rock, the site of the building of Isaac, the binding of Isaac. Perhaps I should mention here that the questionable authenticity of many of the biblical sites held little importance for me. If they enabled me to feel God's presence, they were authentic enough for me.
A
And
placebo should work, right?
yeah, whatever, wherever it is, wherever it is, whatever,
Uh-huh.
uh, it's all still the same. And if you could only understand that there are no sacred places, there are no sacred sites. The sacred place is where I am.
Yeah.
The sacred place is where God is. And God is everywhere. God is in everything. I used to think, that here in Colorado, the San Luis Valley, which is, it's a sacred place. People experience it that way. It's an amazing geologically, it's an amazing place, and
Mhm.
and spiritually, it's an amazing place. I've gone there when I was younger to meditate many times, just because of the vibe of the place. But if I recognized that I was carrying that vibe with me wherever I went, and I could just sit down in the middle of the bus station or the Walmart parking lot and be in that same space, sacred space, because that is where sacred is. It's not one place or another. It's always wherever God is, and God is in everything. Steve, did you want to say something again?
What comes to mind is that I'm told to wear this bodysuit lightly. That doesn't mean that I don't prefer uh, vacations to the mountains or northern New Mexico or ice cream uh, over uh, some other food, but not for it to have the main microphone. Thank you. I'm complete.
Great point. Yeah. Yeah, it's the foreground and background shift, isn't it? When our personal self and interests and separate interests begin to shift, and we realize that they're secondary to the shared interest and the shared identity, we realize we're making some progress. And I think that's another one of Ken's little mini helpful sayings is that when you recognize that I'm going to paraphrase, that perfect oneness doesn't recognize individuality, and you're glad about that. That's the that's the part of, you're identifying more with that part of the mind that realizes that we can actually transition to a state of mind that appreciates peace rather than the war of separate interests. Another thing that comes to mind is early in the text where the uh, it's basically Jesus is saying, all my brothers are special, which would be, if you could generalize that to anything in space and time, then good, all my places are special, all my times are special, which is to say nothing within that seems to be different and distinct is special, but it can be used to return to the holiness or the wholeness if we give it to that correction in our mind. Right? So, then Rafi's got something.
That's all there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Rafi.
Yeah, what keeps coming up to me is that these body images, these little puppets, are really all divine conduits, and that the divine is radiating through all of them, and using them to communicate, and that even though it's an illusion, it's still serving the divinity that is being conducted through all of us is the reality. And every one of us has been specifically designed, orchestrated to serve that. And we don't have to do anything. All we do is show up, and it happens. That because the divine guidance has, again, orchestrated it perfectly for all the benefit of all. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. As you're saying that, Rafi, I was thinking a couple of metaphors come to mind is we all can be the divine conduit, but it's not the conduit that is really the important thing. It's really what flows through the pipes. So setting up a shrine or an altar to plumbing is probably not the purpose, but appreciating the water that flows through it, that is the life-sustaining gift. That's important. In the same way, we're using Zoom and the internet and all kinds of technology to communicate with each other right now across what seem to be significant distances in our little dream of space-time. But it's not the ones and the zeros, and it's not the silicon and the semiconductors and all the little electrical components in our computers and our screens that are making that experience possible. It's really the ideas behind all that the idea of the correction that the course represents, and that Ken's writing represents, that we're reading from, and our sharing together, that we're all aligning ourselves with that correction, and that's the real sacredness, if you will. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think Ken is finding this out here as he's going along here. Okay, so once again, early each morning, shortly after waking up, I would sit at my desk and let the words within flow out, trying to give back to God what he had given me. The single most powerful experiences of my stay in Jerusalem, however, revolved around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I shall describe these in some detail. During my first days of walking, I always seemed to wind up in the vicinity of the church, but I did not go in or even approach its entrance square. This was due not only to an inner reluctance, but also to the negative things I had heard regarding its tourism, crowds, and general rundown melange of conflicting artistic styles, massive scaffolding, and incomplete construction. But on an impulse, I suddenly walked inside one afternoon on about my fourth or fifth day there, and all my negative expectations were confirmed. It was a mess and filled with people. It seemed inconceivable to me that the holiest places in Christendom could be so desecrated. I quickly looked around and then fled, glad to be finished with it and quite sure I would never be back. In discussing my experience there with a friend who knew Jerusalem and the church rather well, I was told that there was something there I might be more interested in, especially given my love for music. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, there was a procession around the church, miniature stations of the cross, as it were. All right, and for those who may not know, the stations of the cross are they're basically depicted the journey of Jesus to the cross, and so all the places in the from the arrest of Jesus, the trial of Jesus, all the different things that happen. They're all depicted sculpturally or in, a picture, pictorially, whatever.
Mhm.
And at each one of them, if you do the Stations of the Cross, you walk up, you say what it was that the thing that happened to Jesus at that station, and then you say a rosary. So to do the Stations of the Cross, I think there's 14 of them.
That's what it
And
says. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh yeah, stopped at 14 places. Okay, so as you go along, you're actually saying like 14 rosaries, and you're looking at every major thing that happened to Jesus during that time, up until the crucifixion and then the resurrection. So miniature Stations of the Cross. This was a Franciscan service which stopped at 14 places, including the final stations as well. Prayers were said before all of them, and beginning with Calvary, the 8th station, they were sung in Gregorian chant. My friend felt I might be responsive to it, and I had to admit it sounded interesting, but I felt no desire to return, and so filed it away for future reference. About 1 week later, the Sunday 4 days before I would be leaving for my week at Latroon, I decided I would give the procession a try. By this time, of course, I felt very much at home in the old city and with myself. I had no definite plans beyond visiting Latroon, but no desire to be returning so soon to the United States, nor even to be leaving Jerusalem or Israel. 4 o'clock drew near, and I felt nervous and uneasy. I began to walk to the church, and then discovered that I couldn't find it. I made one wrong turn after another and became hopelessly lost and confused. I knew where I was, but did not know how to get to the church, whose entrance I had known well enough to avoid the whole previous week and a half. Eventually, I made my way to it and arrived just after the service began. My friend gave me her book and the lighted candle each of us carried. That candle, incidentally, went out 3 times during the course of the procession. No one else's went out even once. But at least I was there, and from almost the moment I joined, there was nothing else. The noise, dirt, and disorder disappeared, and all that existed was the reality of the world I had just entered. Despite the physical setting, this world had no content for me. I did not think. No image of Jesus and his final hours came to mind. I just felt, was carried along by an intense, almost otherworldly current. It began slowly, the first 7 stations, merging into one, beginning in the chapel of the Blessed Sacrament, at the altars of the Blessed Sacrament and the column of flagellation, then the place of imprisonment, the altar where Jesus's clothes were divided, the crypt where the cross was found, the chapel of St. Helena, and the column of coronation. I followed along, barely enunciating the Latin text in front of me, but increasingly caught up in the unfolding inner movement. Then, as we began the approach to the 11th, a stentorian voice suddenly rang out, singing the chant. It rocked me out of the world I was in and plunged me still deeper into a new one. My soul felt completely borne aloft, and I began to tremble. I started to climb the stairs, and my legs felt so heavy I could scarcely lift them. It was clearly not the same place I had visited a week ago. On Calvary, there were 3 stations, the places of crucifixion, death, and the altar of the Blessed Mother. And with each succeeding one, I felt more deeply. We descended, and the 11th station was the stone of anointing, then on to the Holy Sepulchre itself. We were waiting directly outside, singing the increasingly more joyful chants as the leader incensed the tomb. Incense, like with incense, not make it angry. Incensed the tomb. We continued to the altar where Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene, and our voices ascended ever more steadily to heaven, and with them my soul. And then we re-entered the chapel where we had begun 45 minutes before, the place where legend taught that Jesus appeared to his mother. Never was music ever more triumphant or joyful, nor more wondrously employed to glorify God. Tears ran down my face as we knelt, and I could no longer follow what was being sung, nor the act of benediction being performed at the altar. I continued to kneel with my eyes closed, bathed with tears of indescribable joy. And then it was over, and I staggered out, aware only that I had been in the presence of a great mystery, an unfathomable process that somehow had brought me closer to God. Wow.
That might be a good place to pause.
Yeah.
I was thinking about those 14 stations of the cross. Probably not the light rail at the Vatican, but but I was thinking, because I remember first seeing those when I attended a retreat in Danville, California. There's a San Damiano Franciscan Center that we held this thing with this group that I was in the 70s and 80s, and I remember walking around those thinking about the just the feeling of sacrifice and sadness and sorrow and suffering, and specialness. I guess a lot of alliteration there. but again, it was what Ken was bringing to that experience from his willingness to want to see beyond his special interest, really. That I think that's what provided the impetus for that metaphysical experience or that mystical experience, and it would seem, and it could have been in a completely different cultural context, in doing something ordinary or something extraordinary, or independent of all that. It's really, it really boils down to the willingness, isn't it? And he's saying that, and I think we can relate. I think a week or two ago I was relating how I discovered both the toning in the what they call the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, and then using a biofeedback device to monitor my brain waves acoustically. I realized, well, both of those experiences, seem to trigger an altered state, but maybe they were just really a catalyst for me realizing that I could go to that place in my mind whenever I wanted, and that the catalyst or the conduit isn't the important thing. It's really the signal or what flows through that's important, and it's the willingness to allow that current to flow, that correction to undo the blockage to the awareness of love's presence, right?
Exactly. And that, you could go into any Catholic church and you will find those. You can do those, and you can, I mean, I've had that experience of just total sacredness. I mean, we used to have to do it when I was in school, the whole class, especially coming up now is Lent going to be coming up pretty soon. And so, we would do those very often, and it just, it, it puts you in that state. And speaking of earlier of the San Luis Valley, um, there's there is a Stations of the Cross that are, they're big sculptures. So there's 14 of them, and you have to climb a little bit to get to them. But then, and it's out in the desert, so you have to go around this place in the desert to do it. But that's a really trippy, I gotta say, trippy place, because it does, put you in a state of mind. So this is it, this is where we are. And,
It's a pretty trippy place, all right. And I'm going to trip over to a different course related activity, but I wanted and thank you for, as always, Lynn, sharing another wonderful hour, and everyone who's joined us, and look forward to picking up where we left off next week. So love to all, and have a great week.
all right, and I was just going to tell you before you do that,
Okay.
it is in the course that says because I found it in Absence from Felicity. It's found in the course, which I
About the
couldn't find
desert?
if I looked. A desert is a desert is a desert. You can do anything you want in it, but you cannot change it from what it is. It still lacks water. That is why it is a desert. The thing to do with a desert is to leave.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
I think you can. Yep.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. I love you,
Like
brother.
likewise. Have a great week, and we'll see you pick up where we left off next week.
Absolutely. All right.
Thanks.